I just wanted to have this be a casual, kind of comfortable conversation that we can let evolve and let each of them kind of speak to brand in their own way through, sharing through what their experiences have been and what brand means to them. And, hopefully your takeaway is a broad perspective coming from all of them. But I was going to start with Nadia because from my team, she helps us with developing brands. And as a strategist, that really comes from a place of informed thinking and business solutions. So I'm going to pass to Nadia and let her start with, what is a brand? What does that mean?
Sure. Thanks, Aimee. I think what I've learned in this role so far is, first and foremost, my position is to connect dots and then articulate them for our clients and translate them for our design team. I think a lot of that comes from an understanding that brand, the tools that make up your brand should solve your business objectives and your business problems. So first and foremost, it's about sitting with the client, understanding their needs, their objectives, and from that point, immersing ourselves in, the ecosystem of their, whether it's their competitive ecosystem or their market ecosystem, to find out how we can differentiate them and create business solutions that matter and drive success. My role is then kind of charting that course from business problem to business solution, which at Zoyes we solve through, design and creative and marketing tools. So to me, those tools enable relationship building, which is all that brand is. Brand building is just relationship building and relationship maintenance. So beyond your logo, which is what I think a lot of people typically think of when they think of my brand, my logo, my color palette, it's all of the articulations, your narrative, and where that narrative shows up, your website, your print pieces, the experiences that you create for your clients, that taken together help you build and maintain relationship. It's what you put out, but then it's also what people perceive of the relationship you're trying to create. And that's your brand when maintained well and conceived well, I'd say.
That's great. Let's just move down the line and maybe everybody can speak a little bit about, what is your thinking on what is brand and how does that affect you and your business?
I guess I'm next.
Sure.
Can everyone hear? Okay. So at Detroit Wallpaper, our goal is to enrich people's lives with color and pattern and do large installations and take art. Wallpaper is art, wallpaper installations, but to have a good product and to have a good repeatable business success is only the first part of developing a brand. It really boils down to, like you were saying, the customer relationship and the customer experience. So we put a lot of effort into every time we interact with a customer, from the time that the first call to the time that their job is done, to make sure that they're having a predictable, repeatable expectation and experience that's a positive one. We work really, really hard to make sure that everyone gets what they want and the job ends up being a success in the end. So the perception of brand really is nurtured over time. It's not, I don't think brands are born, they're nurtured, and you have to keep growing with those. And it's all the little adjustments that you do along the way, even from like shipping procedures, email headers, the way that you present yourself, your image, your everything that goes together to make a successful, repeatable experience, I think ends up becoming the brand.
You know that saying about people remember the way you made them feel, not what you said. I think that is, a great way to think about branding. It's about what they feel and what they experience.
Yeah, the tone of the relationship has to be set early on. And you have to be really clear with client expectations. So don't promise something that you can't deliver on. Make sure that you're really clear with what you can do and what you're really good at and focus on that first, because then they're not let down. You're doing what you're doing. You do for them what you're best at.
So I'm going to call everybody out a little bit. Sorry, Andi, you're first, so everybody else is going to be thinking. But so if you had to take 2 or 3 words, what comes to mind that would describe your brand for the Detroit Wallpaper Company?
I would like to say sophisticated, but I don't think that that's actually true, because we like a lot of fun and loud things. So through some people's lens, it's not very sophisticated, but I think it's sophisticated because I think art is sophisticated at its core. I would say All right, you three.
Well, so it's funny that you're talking about that because in exercises that we do when we're working on brands, we will go through a number of workshops and exercises and really it's conversational. It's to help us understand and help the designers and creatives think about how to position you. But in what you just said,
Yeah,
you know, we're sophisticated, but maybe if you paired that with, but fun, sophisticated
Yeah.
and fun could be something that makes you unique. And that pairing then would be something that would drive a creative story or a brand story.
the other thing we try to do is have it be effortless for the customer, like the experience. Everyone comes to us with, I've got this amazing idea, and they think it's the biggest challenge in the world, which to them it is, but to us, we've done so many projects that are similar or adjacent to that. We already have a plan. We already have a way to handle their really unique idea and just run it through our process, which we know already works. And so they end up being very happy, you know.
Cool. Mike, how about you? What does brand mean to you?
I guess brand for me was something I discovered. It started with a failure. So my first art endeavor in Detroit, I had a pseudonym. So I tried to hide behind a graffiti name. And I started an art business that went out of business after a few years because it didn't make money. So it wasn't really a business. But in kind of revamping things this go around, I've recycled the logo that I used back then because I thought it'd be kind of fun because I cared about sustainability to recycle a digital asset. And it's just for me, keeping a failure close and having the ethos with me, I guess. And I found through this whole process that for me, brand is being authentic. It's modern and it's fun. And it was something that in finding out who I was and what I wanted to communicate, what I wanted to add, how I was going to add value to this world, then the brand became what that was, what the manifestation of that was. So it wasn't really like deliberate and like this is the thing that I want to bring into the world, because when I did that, it failed miserably. But in doing sort of that inward, journey, I found and was able to then communicate what my company, I guess now, does and what it's about.
I think that's a great point, and that's something that we strive to do is have real conversations and identify real authentic differentiators to bring forward in your brand. Yeah, because if you try to fabricate them, of course, it's not going to be true. It's not going to be consistent, and it's also not going to be special. I think, on finding out what's really important to you drove you to your success, and is also driving your brand. Cool. Jen?
Yeah. I think for us, for brand, in terms of keywords, I think we're a luxury. That's something that we've talked about many times in our office, that, when people come to us, they are spending, money, regardless of the budget and project. And that we are approachable and fun. And I think there's a level of integrity and kind of authenticity in there as well. So I think at any time that you're approaching a brand, and especially branding of yourself or of your company, you have to be authentic in terms of, we can all try to be like Joanna Gaines and have that same style, but does that make sense, right? Do we just do the style that works for us? Or with our team, we are authentic to our client, and we are very specific that we make a special design just for that client. And that's very unique for that client and for that project. And so I really just kind of think that, that's the brand focus.
That's a great point. Maybe you could build on that a little bit, Dan, as far as with interior design or any design industry. I think that there's a decision to be made about how much you're going to project your own brand, your own aesthetic into a project versus allowing the client's aesthetic to kind of drive the choices. The client's loosely, I'll call it brand, or if it's commercial project. The corporate brand, how do you work in your industry or in your firm? Do you choose to kind of have a aesthetic of your own, or it sounds like from what Jen's saying, you take the other road and let the client's brand and aesthetic drive choices?
Yeah. I think Jen said authenticity. I think that's really important. we are not the people to wear, I don't think I've ever seen Jen in a dress, and I've never been in a suit for any client whatsoever. I am a farm boy and I wear jeans and I have my sleeves rolled up, and that's who I am. And I think there's been a real market for that out there. And that's authenticity to me for the brand. I never put my own aesthetic on a client. Jen never does. And I love working like that. I've done my own house and I love it, but I don't need to do it again. I'm waiting for someone to say, build me an all pink house. There's no pink in my house, but if I could do that, I'd be really happy. And it's really fun to have a different set of tools each time we go out. And I think because we approach it that way, it comes off as very authentic.
Yeah, sure. It keeps it fresh.
Yeah.
There's a line to walk there as far as a client wanting you to be a consultant, right? And to help them make good decisions versus allowing them to make those choices themselves. How do you walk that line?
Very carefully. We usually tell clients we won't make the final decision, but we'll stop them from making mistakes. And sometimes when I get home, I'm exhausted because I find I have to put a different hat on for each client. I've got clients who need hand-holding, and I've got clients who you just have to say, no, stop it. And I think that's how you handle that. For me, it takes a different hat with each client.
Sure. That's great. Let's see, I'm going to bring it back around to Mike and sort of connect dots a little bit and talk about personal branding. You know, we were just talking about sort of the opposite approach of it not being a personal brand, if you will. But I think in your case, it is a very personal brand, and almost the opposite end of the spectrum, where I was telling Mike, I mean, he knows, but I have a couple of his pieces, one at my house and one in my office, and I'm very proud of that. And I feel like it affects the environment. You know, clients are coming to our space that I connect with his brand in a certain way, and it's a part of then our collective brand experience. So I think, you know, you've had some extraordinary partnerships and, you know, grown your brand so quickly that it'd be interesting to hear you talk about how you developed your personal brand, and then, you know, what is it that, I mean, people are buying your brand to sort of project their own or to add to their own.
Yeah, I think it was really interesting to discover that when I was able to have the courage to show up as like my authentic self, that people responded well to it. And so, you know, having affirmation was wonderful. It was confirmation that I'm going down the right path. And the more I did things that kind of scared me, that made me more vulnerable, that showed who I was to a broader audience, it's made things harder. It's more and more challenging I thought it was going to get easier. Like after you have a success, then it should be easier to do the next one. But for me, I don't feel that way. I feel like there's more pressure and there's more responsibility. But the thing that drives me is that how do I show up today as who I am? And I'm not an artist like, a lot of, CCS or Cranbrook artists. And I don't have this tremendous ability to leverage materials to render, beautiful things. I paint like a child, what I do is it's who I am, and being able to confidently do the work and have people trust that I'm going to create something that they're going to live with and enjoy. It's a huge responsibility, but at the end, when it's done, it seems like we've been able to make connections, both me and my clients, with the work, with the aesthetic, with the reason for it being. And that's enough. And so then it's just the responsibility of doing it, I guess.
I'm curious, you've done something very enviable with your art, and I doubt there was any deliberate act in it, but it's very recognizable, your artwork. And so it's its own brand. It's almost as if your paintings are an extension of a logo in terms of how recognizable they are because of how graphic. And I think there's a genius in that, but I bet you had that was not a plan. That was just, a happenstance.
So there's a very simple format, I guess, for it, where I have anxiety, a lot of social anxiety. This stuff scares the crap out of me. I can't see freaking out under the table. But Yeah, showing up then, right? So, and so that's actually what the painting started out as, is a piece of white paper scared me because it's perfect. And as soon as you put a mark on it, either you're gonna make it better or it's gonna become garbage. There's two choices. And so the thought that I could actually improve upon this thing that was already perfect, I don't know how to do it. And so overcoming the blank page was huge. And so figuring out how to create one mark, and then create a second mark, and keep on building a composition with organic line and geometric line, the hard and the soft, in order to try to find what I call now dynamic balance. Whereas if within a piece of paper or a wall or whatever it may be, if the goal is to find balance between hard and soft lines, then I'm going to succeed. It's just then again doing the work of following the lines and doing what you're coming to do next. So that whole process is built in, and the result is, you know, a similar kind of it's who I am, and it's just imbued in the work because of the process that I've created, the format that I've created for it.
It's very relatable. Touches people. Andi, how would you speak to, in a similar fashion, I think I'm imagining with Detroit Wallpaper, people are buying, investing in their brand through your aesthetics, through the, you know, the graphics and the artwork that you're providing in a wallpaper fashion.
For sure. I mean, fine art, wallpaper, there really is a kind of a razor's thin difference between those two things, but ours at the end of the day is like a repeatable product that we're trying to get people to buy again and again, or come back to us because of a certain aesthetic. So I have to emulate what an imaginary client might want and project myself and try and harness my artistic and creative endeavors into someone else's vision. So when I'm creating product, you know, it's like, well, you don't have a pineapple design. Well, now I have to be really inspired and creative and make the most beautiful pineapple I can imagine, but it's for somebody else. So it's a really weird process to get into, but once you find the groove, it's actually pretty easy, because you have to trust yourself and trust that you're going to take a blank page and turn it into something beautiful and something desirable. You know, I think our brand really speaks to the finished product and like the way that it works in a space, and what wallpaper can do to change a space, and like the feeling that you get. So I would say it's kind of aspirational, because people have this idea of, you know, clean and contemporary and feeling secure and no loose ends. I think that's like really satisfying for someone mentally to go into a space and not see something out of place, or not see something, you know, piece of trash in the corner or whatever. But I think it all comes together in more of a feeling, like our brand is a feeling, not in a specific product, because we can't get too fully vested in any one pattern, because it's like fashion. You know, we essentially working in the fashion industry when it comes to wallpaper. Fashion trends come and go a lot quicker when you talk about clothes, but the cycles are much bigger and longer, and the things that stay in the fashion industry ends up translating into interior design. So we have to kind of follow those trends and kind of steer the artwork. I've been trying to invigorate our current offerings with a lot more hand-done stuff. So I've been doing a lot of like painting, even like digital art where it's not graphic design. I've been using painting apps and stuff to replicate painting techniques and oil and ink and crayon and Conti and all these different things to create a hand feel, because people, I think, really want, like you're saying, authentic, like everyone says, an authentic experience with digital art, because really this is digital art at this point. It's digitally printed. So trying to pierce that veil between digital and hand done to create a product that's desirable and has a place in the market.
Sure. Yeah, I was thinking about a question for you. So Nadia comes from P&G, Procter & Gamble, working on global brands, and then moved to this market and started working with us. And I was thinking you could maybe share, how has it been different for you? You know, working on that scale at P&G is obviously very different than working in an agency like ours. We're only 18 people and 10 on the brand team. But also the shift from those products to working directly with our clients, which could be an interior designer or an architect or on a commercial or residential development project. What's your experience been? How is it different? And how do you use your incredible brand brain in this new way?
Yeah, I mean, coming from P&G, working on global brands, of course, we were also selling packaged goods, which are, pretty finite, and, you're selling toothpaste and toilet paper for the most part. And there's a limit to how much you can market that when everyone knows they need toothpaste and toilet paper. But they're big brands and they have to be maintained. And in many ways, they have such a sure brand identity and place in people's lives and homes that there's a massive responsibility in that. But I think what I'm hearing pretty consistently with everyone today is brand is largely experience. That was true at P&G, but I think I found it even more true in the clients we work with now because they're clients. My customers are no longer Target and Walmart. They're people with small businesses or mid-size and large and growing businesses. And in many ways, whether they realize it or not, they're personal brands. Product and experience are, or I'll say product always, has to be quality, but experience is so much more paramount. And I think something that we do in the exercise Aimee had us do, what are the, your 3 core attributes of your brand? Let's say fun, that comes through how you interact with your clients. But I think for us, with the work we do with our designers, fun translates into a color palette or a tone of voice. And it's how do you ensure that the authenticity of who you are comes through in the physical and the visual, but also in the experiential, which taken together kind of creates and maintains your brand. So I think that's something I probably knew at P&G, but has become so much more tangible now with the clients that we work with, because it's so much more important. The person to person is so much more important for maintaining brands and ensuring, they're built for longevity.
I'll go to Dan and Jennifer then, and I'm curious to think about, have you talked to, specifically in your commercial projects, but residential too, but if you think about a commercial client, they have a corporate brand, they have some type of brand, and as you're designing, how do you, what's your process like to be able to understand what their brand is, their kind of core tenets to their brand, so that it informs your decisions?
So that's something that I have to really give a lot of thought when I approach a commercial project, because I have to think about not only their brand, but also their end user and how their end user is going to interact with their brand or experience their brand and all of that. I have a client that one of my commercial clients, their brand color is orange. But I'm not going to like Nickelodeon it up and like have it be dripping in orange, right? And even if that's what they tell me they want, it's kind of like, okay, let's scale this back. How is your patients interact with this space? It's a medical facility. When you're coming in for a procedure, how do you feel in the orange space, and things like that. And so it's a lot about color choices and understanding the space and understanding the psychology of the end user and what they're thinking and feeling at that point as well. And so kind of it's also kind of using that spidey sense, right? When you're like, this is what the client is telling you, but it's like, okay, this is really what the client wants. So, yeah.
And I think the same with commercial and residential. Sometimes you have to remind the client what their brand is. They get distracted. There's something shiny, and they just go off on a tangent. And it's our job to bring them back. Whether it's a little easier to understand that in commercial, but even in residential, we do lots of homework with our clients to understand them. Then we do ideation boards. It distills down to a concept, and we assign 3 or 4 words to that for each client. That's how we get to do such different looks all the time. And sometimes what they want scares them. And sometimes you have to go back and remind them, but this is what you wanted. And they're like, oh yeah. So it's a constant effort to just keep them on track even more than us.
Yeah, sometimes we get hired by architects or interior design firms to come on board for additional brand support. so that we can take clients through exercises and mood boards and positioning statements and help them understand, why certain decisions would be more rooted in their branding. We had a fun project, like I'm thinking of one that actually collaborated with Andi on, which was with Rossetti Architects. They brought us in as the brand team. This was for Bedrock and the family of companies in their a fitness facility. And then Andi actually did the kind of
So many grays to color match.
so many grays to color match. He ended up doing all the environmental graphic executions for us throughout this whole fitness center. But getting off base a little bit, what I was just trying to talk about is I enjoy working with other designers and collaborating with architects, with interior designers, with other thinkers, like-minded people that are trying to help their clients, come to good decisions, solid decisions. Instead of saying, I like blue, it's, well, are we choosing blue because you said that your core tenets are XYZ and we want your clients to experience this space or this brand in a certain way. So therefore we're going to choose green.
I usually client request, I give them exactly what they asked for. I give them what I like, and then I usually give them an option that's in between. And they almost always throw out exactly what they asked for.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I've heard some designers talk about the theory of always putting one stinker in there, a really bad one, because then at least, get that one out of the way.
Tinkering. Flies.
Mike, could you talk a little bit about the partnerships that you've been doing, the events that you've been having with large scale companies? I mean, you've been in business, Mike Hahn, House of Hahn has been in existence for how long?
2 years.
2 years. And you have worked and collaborated with Bloomingdale's, Detroit Pistons, Google startups, Ford Motor Company, LinkedIn, and the Somerset Collection. Now also Red Bull, Vitamin Water, and Art Prize. That's right. Talk to us a little bit about that. How did you, how do you think maybe brand work or how did that all come about so quickly?
It didn't come quickly, I guess. A lot of it came from, or some of it came from the 10, 12 years ago when I started in Detroit. That's when the first time I interacted with Vitamin Water and Red Bull was back then in doing a product that it was called the Woodward Windows. We transformed 7 vacant buildings in downtown into a world-class public art gallery. So when I was young and dumb, and I'm still pretty dumb, I saw all this vacancy and I thought it was like, this is perfect. I'm enamored with Wynwood and I want to bring great art to the 2 blocks that are separating the ballpark from downtown. And that's why people aren't walking. It's sort of kind of what I had in my brain. And so if we made it vibrant, by adding art here, then I believe people would then walk from the stadium downtown instead of leaving, getting in their car and driving back to the suburbs. And so as an artist, I create an opportunity for myself, but then also for others. And in doing that, I got to work with brands because then they liked art and they also liked the windows because one of our buildings became, we got, after a year and a half, we got kicked out of our buildings, out of 4 of them because they were leased. One of them became H&M, others were Bonobos, Madewell, and like Detroit is the New Black. And one of those buildings, like all that stuff's gone, but H&M's still there. And so the exposure, like being very thoughtful of like, what am I going to do with my very limited resources is I'm new and nobody knows me. And I want to do something that has impact. And so that really helped set the tone, I guess, for like what I wanted to do. But directionally, like from a business standpoint, I had no idea how to make money. I was partnered with an art gallery at that time, and they sold prints I didn't really know of like from the artists that were putting stuff in the windows. So they had a way to make money, but I was just spending money. So I went out of business very quickly. And so that kind of helped, the networking that I did then, it all kind of came back full circle. And so now that I've been, doing projects and also being mindful of the impact that those projects have, whether they're paid or unpaid, is sometimes, I would take projects that I would just invest my time because I thought it would provide me an opportunity to get seen by the right type of people. that could hire me for the next projects. And so I feel very lucky that it's just led to, you know, more and more things.
I think it's more than luck.
So,
But I'm happy for you. I have another thought for Nadia. Maybe you could speak to this. So this is a very recognizable brand that we're working on that everybody in the room would know, which is Michigan Central Station. So we were recently hired by Ford to help them with Michigan Central. And it's an unusual project, right? In many, many ways, but maybe you can talk a little bit about it and how you think our firm is going to help them through branding.
Sure. I mean, Michigan Central Station is obviously, I think, an iconic asset for Ford and for the city of Detroit. And the project is very nebulous and evolving, it seems. But where we're able to plug in is to, I think, help them create the tools that will support their vision, which it's going, literal tools, literal, graphic standards and presentation templates and maps and illustrations that will help them tell their story and help bring the experience that they hope to bring to the city and the state to life. So, I mean, probably repeating myself a few times at this point, but if brand is experience, how can we help create the tools that support that experience? And I think we're plugging into a small bit of what they're trying to accomplish, but hopefully it gives them sort of the infrastructure to promote themselves and tell their story and to invite people to engage in it so that the experience that they're working so hard to create can be, leveraged and understood. I think that's probably what we try to do at our core in all of our projects is just how can we give you the tools so you can support yourself and support the vision that you're trying to create or the experience that you're trying to provide for your audience, your consumers, your client, the end consumer, which is always the most important. Everything has to be created with that end user in mind, for sure.
I hope they need us a lot and for a very long time.
Yes, absolutely.
Fun project to be involved in. Maybe we could go down the row and everybody can just speak about either a current or past project that, you'd like to talk about as far as branding or, a success, something you're excited about.
There's a lot that I'd like to talk about. We're developing a private label relationship with an international retailer. And so they have a very specific client that they're going after, and it's very high end, and it's ultra sophisticated, and they're relying on me to again channel their vision into custom wallpaper, and they send inspiration pics, and then I create stuff that I'm like madly in love with, and I send it to them, and they're like, "We don't like it," and my ego goes way down, and then I regroup, pick myself back up and try again, and so like. Trying to work with such a stringent audience and like their tolerances of what they're looking at, their window of what they think is acceptable is so narrow. So like trying to throw that ball from across the room and make it through the tiny opening that they're giving you is difficult. But hopefully it is paying off. The collection is launching in March, so we're super excited. But yeah, it can be difficult to maintain your brand while being someone else's visionary.
Well, congratulations. Can you tell us what it is?
I can't.
Launching in spring.
It's launching in spring.
Okay.
All right. We'll be watching.
I'm going to cheat and share two, but they're real quick. One is Red Bull. I'm very, very excited to work with them again as I'm going to be leading a workshop for some college students. It's called Doodle Art, and they're doing a competition. And so I'm going to get to help inspire art school students in this as they create artwork for this competition. And so getting to teach and share a little bit about my journey and that they can also be full-time artists and that you don't have to have a skill that CCS students already have in order to do it. I think is going to be a really wonderful thing as I want to really help more artists become full-time artists because there's plenty of talented people out there and not many of them are receiving the value that they deserve. And I think that's a travesty. So That's kind of the big goal, you know, down the road for me is working in that capacity. And then the second I bring up is the Pistons because I'm getting to do a jersey with Jade and Ivy, and so do custom jersey that's going to get auctioned for their foundation. The reason I wanted to share the second one is because I've learned that in creating my work and being authentic and wanting to give and wanting to serve and leverage the things that I've been able to do to help others is at my core. And so giving has been part of my brand, I guess. It's been something that I've done for the past 2 years, whether it's, you know, raising money from paintings that I've made myself or participating in auctions and live paintings and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, I don't ever want to brag or be boastful, but I think it's extraordinary that when you show up in this way, the results can be extraordinary. And so from 2 years ago, being unemployed, no job, no art career, nothing, to in the past 2 years, I've helped raise over $275,000 for nonprofits and great causes.
Wow.
So it's just ridiculous. So like doing those things that are like deep in your heart, like even if they're scary, like that for me that's been, you know, in the brand building. And I think that's also attributed to getting to work with more brands because those provided great exposure as well. So
Nice.
Okay, so if Mike cheated and gave two, can I give two?
Sure.
Okay, so two commercial projects that I'm very excited about. One is a continuous project. We work with a small optometrist firm group, and they are popping up with new locations kind of all throughout southwestern or southeastern Michigan. And so it's great because we can kind of take each city or each location and kind of take a little twist on their brand based on the location or the end user or who. Maybe this is a pediatric center and you know, I get to work with Charlie Harper prints and fun things like that. So that's a cool project. And another commercial project is that on our boards is our first restaurant, and so we're very excited about that. We have a small independent mom and pop restaurant, a Thai restaurant, kind of this Asian fusion mix of food and sushi. And they're opening up a new location that is that has seating. So there's a dining room, which is great versus the takeout window is what they have now. And their goals for this is to be a flagship and then a franchise. So we're able to really grow with them as they build that business. And kind of help style that brand. And it's really, really exciting.
Fun.
Yeah.
For my days in advertising, I love collaborating. Jen and I do a lot of that. Sometimes we'll just walk in and say, I need your eyes. And we'll look at each other's projects. And sometimes you get a little too close. And sometimes you tell someone to need to step back and look at this. And we do that for each other. I've had the privilege of working on two very different clients in the last 2 years. One was a Wallace Frost home in Birmingham, very historic home. 2 years it took us on that project, not because of us, but it took 2 years. And the client was very upright when she talked to us and said, I want someone to collaborate. And I love that. And we worked on everything together. It wasn't like some clients where you just do the design and you present it to them and they say yes and you're done. We collaborated down to customization of a lot of stuff. There was a beautiful copper hood over the fireplace that I think it's like 10 feet wide. And so we had that replicated for them in the kitchen as a hood for the stove. Just things like that we worked on and sketched together. And I loved how that turned out. And then we just recently finished a project last year working for a really phenomenal designer. She designs children's toys and pottery, and she used to be in advertising. Amazing designer. And she said, I need you to come and help me. I need you to edit me. So it wasn't typical working with her. And I absolutely loved it because she would bring ideas and we would sketch. And it was just in Detroit Design magazine and another publication, I forget what, but it was really rewarding.
Fun.
Yeah.
Fun. Well, we've got about 15 minutes left, a little shy. Craig, do you want me to open this up for Q&A? And if so, should we walk the mics around? How would you like us to do that?
Branding. Do you look at it from more of a perspective where it should be room left for fluidity to grow and change in time, or do you want something that's more grounded and institutional that is going to stand the test of time so people know that that's you?
That's a great question. Do you want to take that a little bit, Nadia?
Sure, I'll start. I think your brand should be authentic to who you are. When you use your tools, your logo, your narrative consistently, they'll become iconic enough to stand the test of time. I think that's a matter of just consistent use and continuing to show up, not a certain aesthetic or design, just consistency and authenticity.
I think it also depends on what kind of business you're in. I think from your perspective, you're trying to present an image as a realtor and trying to create a lifestyle for your clients. So I think that should definitely have room to evolve over time, because you're going to change who you are and your clients are going to change. You have to be open to adjusting and tweaking as you go.
We go through brand evolutions often.
Mm-hmm.
So, sometimes we're starting a new brand and sometimes we're evolving a brand. And in the evolution case, we go to Nadia's point, we try to come back to what are the core tenets, and maybe they've shifted some, but there's typically kind of the core tenets that are there that we would uphold, and then think about, but how have you grown or changed over the last 2, 5, 10 years? And how do we then shift this brand? And so a lot of times that can be a big question mark and an expensive one. On a larger scale, if it's a bigger company, that brand could be expressed in numerous ways. A landscape company might have it all over all of their vehicles and all of their apparel and their website and their print materials and their signs. So we often start with those clients to, I'll say to them, well, we're going to start with conversations about that, about budget and about your core tenets. And then it could be that your logo has a tweak and a shift, but it's still recognizable, and you kind of phase through making changes as you can afford to, and as you can accomplish that over time.
Mm-hmm.
How would you, or do you add a branding to that, or do you incorporate it in the branding that you already have? So we're starting home organization within the design. So if someone's gonna search for a home organizer, professional home organizer, how can we looking for
Sure.
incorporate?
I mean, you're asking the question because you've already had all of your gears turning about it, right? And you're thinking through these decisions as business decisions. And basically the way we work is we bring Nadia in to come in and do a number of different workshops with you. Maybe it's desktop research, maybe it's looking at your competition, it's thinking about traffic to your website, as you just said. It's a lot of different questions that have to be asked to then determine how to position, call it a sister brand. And sometimes it's a very recognizable connection for good business decisions. And sometimes you're talking to a different demographic, so it needs to shift more. Or sometimes there even have been situations where you might want your core brand to be separate at certain times from the other, because maybe the other doesn't make sense for all of your clientele. And maybe it diminishes their experience of your core brand in some capacity, and vice versa. Sometimes traffic coming to this brand or this website might not want to think that you're under another umbrella. So there's a lot of different questions that we would have to ask to help you, but that's what we do, is sort of help guide.
Yeah, I think it's certainly a matter of understanding who you're trying to speak to. How do they find you and what do they want to hear? Does it benefit you to, play off of your existing, reputation? Is that how your audience is finding you? And is that reputation going to credential you well? Or is this a totally new experience, a totally different consumer set? And there's room to be creative and to expand into a different aesthetic or a different narrative. But I think it starts with audience.
We experienced that with our own brand, and we still do. We're going to go through a rebrand this year. So we'll be bringing this conversation again to light. But we have, my husband's team is in Ferndale and my team is in Detroit. We're a brand agency in the Detroit office, and their background is they all have a background in either architecture or construction, and they're doing renderings and animations and physical models, where we're doing more of a consultancy model where we come in and help, position brands and then create brand deliverables. So we had the same challenge. We talked through it in the website, and we called the teams the brand team and the form team. And then sometimes through, narrative and story and content in a website, you can explain the two and sort of position it the way you need. And then we created a secondary website just for him because he gets direct traffic from all over the country for architectural models. So, there's a lot of different ways to go about it, depending on, as Nadia was saying, kind of how do we leverage you in the best way, your current credentials, driving the secondary brand.
We split Detroit Wallpaper, Westfall and Kitson up. Westfall and Kitson is another wallpaper line that we have, but it's a trade only line. It's not a retail line. So the representation is through showrooms. The artwork is styled. It's a little bit more in a specific lane. And we just used our methodology and the business success and the tools that we use to create Detroit Wallpaper to basically rubber stamp another wallpaper company that we also manage. So, and that one's just sold direct to designer through the showroom situation. So the client's different, the marketing is different, the patterns are different. So they're separate but equal. But the Detroit Wallpaper reputation didn't do anything to lift up Westfall and Kitson other than the know-how to create wallpaper. So like if in your case, if your businesses can support two separate client bases and two separate business models, then make two separate businesses. Like you just have to figure out how you want to manage it, like they're saying, like the tools and how the information comes in, how it's distributed.
And then there's a hybrid solution, right? There's by Ruth Casper Design or by RC or, a tagline. So there are different ways to position them.
When you were looking at your actual product, what about, was it the product or was it outside influences because you realize that?
I think it was it has to do with trying to build self-confidence, and so again, the work was made for me. It was my therapy, right? And it continues to be. Like even when I paint a mural, right? Like they're freehand, they scare the crap out of me. I hate doing them. And like it's so weird. People are like, you must love being, an artist. I'm like, I don't. Like, it's hard. But I'm compelled to do it. Like, and it's helping me get better. Like, speaking is hard, but I have to do it. Like, I have to interact with people. And for me, in making it work, I have to do it to build self-confidence, to feel more comfortable in my own skin and showing people this is who I am. And if somebody receives it well, that helps, but if I don't do that, if I don't take that risk, then I don't allow the world to potentially, hopefully benefit, but like to provide some sort of affirmation, because in my own brain between, the 2 years, like it's not nice, and so I'm not going to tell myself like, oh yeah, you're doing great, that looks great, all that stuff. That doesn't happen. So it has to come from somewhere else. And so I think that's why I've been compelled to do it, even though it's been painful when it wasn't successful, I guess, in the past.
What do you say? What are the first tangible? I need
Sure.
Not to be ambiguous. Like, what is the tangible first thing that us kindergartners need to that would help me?
Do you want to speak to process a little?
Sure. I mean, what I'll say to start, what you alluded to yourself, I'm guessing you already have a brand because you yourself are your brand and you've been in business and you're creating consistent experiences. That's your brand. I think when it comes to expressing that physically and tangibly, our process starts, getting to know what that brand experience has been that you created for yourself and your clients, understanding who you are now, where you want to be, how do you evolve? How will that evolution potentially happen, since it seems you're someone who likes to change and to be immutable. But I think from there, we distill those, those core attributes that keep coming up about who are you? And maybe one of those is, evolution. It's change. And that's something that we incorporate into your narrative, how you talk about yourself to your clients, in physical form, like a website or a print piece, but also just your talking points when you give yourself a pitch.
Your elevator speech.
Right, yeah. And then your marks, right? Like your logo, your name, your taglines, if you want one, so that your introduction is always consistent. So that at face you're always consistent, you're always recognizable, but then you back it up with who you are, which is what you've already been doing. But I think that's what we try to do for our clients is, distill who you are, create a few specific, highly usable things like your logo, your palette, your types, your narrative. And then that can come to life in myriad ways.
All of those things, though, are still brand tools.
Right.
They're tools that you're using to create the image that you want. But ultimately, your brand is how your customers perceive you. So that's a hard truth, actually. So all your work, all your effort to try and steer and direct the conversation, whatever, it's really just your last customer and what they think of you. That's your brand.
You have your fantasy what you think you are, the reality is something very
That's,
Yeah.
that's a really great point. I think maybe you're putting too much pressure on yourself. Don't think about the brand and everything that goes along with the brand. Start smaller, write down 3 words that describe you, then ask your friends, is this me or do you need to change these words? Start something like that and then start to build out from there. Don't try to put so much pressure on yourself.
I mean, I think something we've heard of here a lot is clients or, selves who you try to portray or project what you'd like to be instead of just being authentic to who you are. Because then the disconnect between the tool and the experience is off.
If you're trying too hard, it's going to show. So you should naturally kind of fall into your own groove. And I think for you specifically, because you're an artist and your brand is you and your personal connection and relationship with your client, that is going to, find itself. You're going to center, obviously the pendulum is going to swing a little bit, but it's going to stay in a course. So yeah, distilling that experience, what feels natural is what you want to portray. And that I think is the root of authenticity.
Yeah, I think we're all always go back to that authenticity thing, but I once heard a designer say that she was upset that she saw other interior designers in jeans in the Michigan Design Center. And I thought, well, maybe that's right for your brand, but that's not right for my brand. Our brand is very approachable. And we've heard that with feedback. We know that about ourselves now. So if I showed up to a suit every time I went to our clients, they would feel uncomfortable. So you really got to understand who you are and portray that.
I think some other things to think about, just reiterating the authenticity piece, it's the know thyself, right? It's know who you are truly at your core, and then try to have that guide you so you are staying in a lane. Because I think another place that you can make a mistake is not having a differentiator and just being everything to everyone, you can't maintain it. And it doesn't speak to anyone. It's not memorable. It's not going to stick. So I think that's another piece.
But I mean, you are an interior designer, but I collaborated with couple of other companies, furniture or custom, right? But I don't want to show that I'm a neatness. I'm a silly designer.
It's a delicate situation on the get because as long as the two brands really inform one another, like if those pieces don't play perfectly well and really speak the same language, like to a customer for one is definitely going to be a customer for the other, then I think they can show in the same space. You can do it, you're going to have to inform your client like in some way to tell that story that makes sense, that doesn't, absolve or dissolve your your image or what you're trying to portray while still doing honest effort and a service to the other brand. So it's a delicate situation.
I think it's a balance, if it was on a website where you were representing the two, We'll talk about first, second, and third narratives. What's most important, what's most primary, what should dominate the experience that someone has on their website. That's the biggest takeaway. And then also we have this other piece. And it could also be the same in your space, in your office, a physical space. So, 2/3 or 3/4 of your space is representative of your interior design business, but we also have some retail. That might be tricky with, selling furniture because of the amount of space that's required, but it's really just about perception, and trying to find the right
education is
balance.
important in the situation to really educate your client.
Something that was in the realm of design and networking. How keep yourself?
You don't look. Seriously, you put the blinders on, you do what you want to do, you stay focused on your goals, and you don't watch the competition.
Run your race.
Our brand personality is approachable, adaptable, and highly personalized. And those three sets of words is what we live by and we go back to. To also do that with our clients, for each of our clients' ideation boards, we assign a small set of words, whatever those words may be. It might be mid-century meets rustic. It helps the whole team and it helps us stay focused because we don't just have one look we do. We don't have one budget we work with. So while that's really fun, I mean, I get a new set of paints for every project we get to do. It's fun. But it can also be like, oh, wow, which client is this? I once had one client start and another client start. They were both mid-century modern with turquoise and red. Talk about getting confused. It was really hard to keep on track. So I think you have to sort of really figure out, we're going to go back to that authenticity thing again. But we know that about ourselves. We know that about our brand, and we're very comfortable in that. And we never sway from that. Did that answer your question? Okay.
So I guess for me, it's about my paintings are all about connecting, right? So it's just a very simple truth. We're all connected, people and planet. And my lines, they're all physically connected. And so diving deeper into that very simple truth, for me, then it's then about what is the work about, what is it for? What is its purpose? Well, it's got to be to serve people on the planet. And so that's been the driver for everything that I've done. And then from an aesthetic standpoint, I'm influenced by Korean calligraphy, Keith Haring and New York graffiti from when I was young, and mid-century modern furniture. As my father worked for Herman Miller and Knoll, I got to grow up around really beautiful design. And so those three things really inform the aesthetics of the reason why I do it.
I think for Detroit Wallpaper, it's an interesting question because we're dealing with so many different personal aesthetics. Every one of our clients has their own vision for their space. So I think our job is to kind of create beautiful things and give people permission to want what they want and love it. They don't care what their mother-in-law says or their neighbor says or their really awful best friend. So I would say it's personal expression. It's kind of like sophistication again and authenticity. So we're allowing people to be individual because we have so many options. We can do so many customizations. We can change color, we can change scale. We can make it exactly how they want it, and it's all still fits within the ease of our production methods and digital printing. So.
Let me pass this one to you.
Okay. I would say for us, now we are going through an evolution, and I think that's often the case. Or I would say architectural is a big part of our legacy, and architectural kind of speaks to design in a bigger sense. So I'm kind of torn between design and architectural, but that's very specific. That's very unique for a branding and marketing agency that we have that in our roots and our background. And then I would choose the word intentional. And what I mean by intentional is I think that the solutions we provide come from an informed place, the strategy piece, but also driving for, this is going to sound corny, but like driving for best work, quality work. So to me, intentional is sort of exudes that commitment level.
I mean, protecting in what sense? I mean, and I think protecting it's something we encounter a lot with our clients is brand management. And I think management is a key way of protection. You either invest in the tools or you invest in the experience and the clients. And there's due diligence, I think, that has to be paid to using that brand consistently, showing up with the same experience consistently. Or else you risk cannibalizing yourself and everything you're working for. I think consistency is super key in ensuring you don't hurt yourself and that the brand can serve itself. That's what I'd say.
We also have seen
You have another
mistakes
meeting
made.
or something?
Yeah. Trademark,
Oh, like,
Oh.
so someone else is gonna steal your brand?
right? I mean,
Well,
we've experienced some of that, going through, it depends on how much of an investment you want to make as far as hiring an attorney and looking into, your trademarking opportunities and your name and all of that depends on how big of an investment and how much you want to protect it and how at risk you are in terms of the scale of your business. But even for some of our smaller clients, they've encountered issues where we'll usually talk about that with them and ask them to engage their attorney for advice about how much to invest in protecting. But we have seen, clients choose a name and they're very attached to the name. We develop a brand and then they find out they can't trademark later as they've grown, and that becomes a problem. Or we've seen something just came to mind about realtors. We've seen other realtors have come to us and asked and invested in quite a bit of brand work and developing of a unique brand for themselves, and then come to find out that, the brokerage team that they work with, they can't actually exhibit their own brand. And then, they've taken missteps and maybe made some unfortunate investments. So it's kind of a big can of worms that you're opening up.
some of these situations work themselves out. If your brand is doing really well, you're your authentic self, your company is successful, someone might try to copycat that, but for them, it's not going to be authentic.
Mhm.
So they might have some marginal success in the beginning, but they'll fade away.
Mhm.
They won't be around forever.
Mhm.
Hello, my name's Karen. I've had my business for years and years, but I still love it. It's still part of me. And I just have a quick question for you.
The short answer is there's no wrong. There's no wrong. I mean, it just depends on the product, it depends on who you're trying to reach. There's a lot of things that you can do. Some things you might have less success with, and so you taper back on those, but you still have to put yourself out there. So sometimes an ad is not meant to get a specific job or get a specific client, but it's like visual recognition and consistency and making sure that you're well represented. So some advertising dollars are just literally thrown right out the window.
Yeah.
You have to be okay with that.
I mean, on a larger scale, though, there can also be a great investment in market strategy. I mean, the work that Nadia is doing work with Bedrock for Book Tower and an entire market strategy rollout of which media channels should be selected and how many investment, what's the investment scale based on the demographic and based on, where the consumer might be. So there's so many different ways to answer your question. I mean, on a very small scale, it's really about thinking through who you're trying to connect with and then finding places to do that.
Well, I mean, I'll add to that. Coming from P&G, name of the game was big and popular. It's literally what they called it. And it's because we had massive budgets and we could just spray our message anywhere. Yeah, right, exactly. Isn't that lovely? You can have sufficient reach with every person in every home. But I think when you obviously have, smaller budgets and have to make more specific decisions, getting clear about who you're trying to talk to and where are they consuming media and messages. And maybe that is word of mouth. Maybe you find out, the best place to go for XYZ is from my mother-in-law. So you need to get into the ears of every mother-in-law in town. Or I find out my news through, local influencers in my area and they tell me what's cool and what I should be doing. So it's understanding who you're trying to reach and where they get their information. And
you may not get it right first try.
No.
So don't be afraid to try several things and then monitor them and just, make notes of what's working. If it's not working, walk away and try something else.
Don't get discouraged either. Just because a message isn't landing in a certain media doesn't mean it's a bad message.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for coming and thank you our panelists. Hope to see you at that one. If you'd like to stick around the network, get another plate of food, and thank you again.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you everybody for coming.